Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today in a chat about trade credit data. From a very early age in our lives, data has already become a very important part of what we do every single day. We observe and take in data and make decisions about it. We make something like 30,000 decisions every day as a human being, all based on data, something that we see, observe, and then we make a decision on that. I mean, it's fascinating if you think that your whole life evolves around information and data, and how through your life, as you progress, different sets of data has different sets of importance in the role that it plays with you. In the world of information that we are in today, information is so available and at your fingertips that you can do almost anything from your house, from a laptop, where you can get information. I think back in my days at school, and I had to do certain projects, we used a thing called an encyclopedia. Some people, the name is even too big to pronounce. But that is where we got our information from. Today we joke and we just say, Google it. And it is right there at your fingertips, information. Before you engage in anything, let's do the research. I think the teenagers today, when they hear that this boy or this girl likes them, the first thing they do is they go and do data research. Not date research, data research. And they go and see who this person is, where this person comes from, who are their friends, what do they associate with, what do they like. And with that information, they engage in this relationship with the person. Very informed. And in nowadays, my days, years and years and years ago, when Paul Kruger was still playing rugby for the Springboks, we didn't have all this information. We used very little resourced information that we had available to make decisions on. Now, in the credit world, nothing is different to this. Years ago, we made use of researched information, information that was available to us, information that was obtained by people like credit bureaus, banks, credit insurance houses, various different sources, brokers that gathered information to enable us to make some certain critical decisions. Just think about investments today. If an investment broker comes to you and says to you, do you want to invest some money? And you say yes. And he says, give me your money and I'll invest it. You're first going to ask him, in what? And what is the risk attached to it? Because you want that data to make a calculated decision as to what you're going to do. Now, in our world, in the credit world, the sets of data that we've had available over the last years was very critical to us. And I'm talking about information like who is the company or who is the individual that we're going to trade with? Where do they find themselves? Who do they engage with? What do they do? What else are they involved in? Then it goes one further and to say, are there any negative information known about this business? We then engage with the banks to get a bank code. And now the banks have said, we don't do that anymore. We used to get trade references, and they played a critical role in our decision making. I can remember how valuable trade references used to be to us. We used to pick up the phone and phone someone and have a conversation around a debtor, or a futuristic client of ours, or a futuristic customer of ours. Who is the customer? To what extent do they trade with you? What are the terms that you've granted them? How do they pay? How regular do they pay? Do they take settlement discount? Do they have lots of queries? And this was an open discussion. And then we started getting problems. And what problems am I referring to? I'm talking about things like, as I said just now, that the banks stopped giving information. They stopped giving bank codes. Trade references to certain restrictions that we started getting by law, by Act, National Credit Act. People were starting to get afraid of sharing information. So they shared less, or they shared information, but so invaluable that you and I couldn't make a decision on the information that we used to get. Nowadays, they will ask you, if they even do give a trade reference, to send them a mail or a WhatsApp. And they will then return on that and say to you, yes, Martin Petzer has an account with us. His credit limit is confidential. His terms are 30 days. And he pays fairly. What exactly does that mean? The importance of data is so critical in our lives, as I just said just now, that every decision that we make is based on data. Whether it is what we see, whether it's what we read, whether it's what we hear, whether it's what we feel, it's all data. If you put your hand on a hot plate, the data from your fingertips to your brain is like this. It says it's hot. Don't touch it. When a mother walks into a kitchen and there's a child walking around, data is shared and said, do not touch that. You will burn. And then what do they sometimes do? They do touch. Because the data that they got, they didn't trust or believe, or had to test it for themselves. Now, in a lot of instances, every bit of data that we receive needs to be tested to ensure that whatever we're going to use that data for is correct, reliable, trustworthy, and it's going to give us an outcome or a result that's going to assist us in whatever decision we take. Now, in our world, it has changed so much over the last couple of years. In the past, you could have taken 2, 3 a week to make a decision on whether or not you want to engage with a new client, open an account, and you took your time and investigating, is this the correct caliber of client that you want to deal with? And to make sure that they're going to add value to your business. But in today's world, the competition is so vast that time is of the essence. That information that we need to obtain needs to be fast, quick, and reliable. Why? Because we make the decision before our opposition does that. We need to engage with the client before our opposition does that. But we need to ensure that we have done that with the minimum of risk possible. Now, I know some companies have got large margins and they don't care to take a risk. But in the majority of businesses these days, the margins are very small. And therefore, risk cannot be tolerated and needs to be ensured that there is minimal risk when you engage with someone. Now, with all this that I've spoken about and all these obstacles that we have, information that we use to make decisions has changed and evolved as well. With the capabilities that we have these days in intellectual information, the analytic side of the world has become very important. I mean, just look at your DNA. Years ago, you would have had to take your mother and father's word for it to say you're their child. Today, you can have your DNA checked and tested to ensure that. But not just that. You can do a worldwide check on your DNA to see if you've got family or connections or anybody else anywhere else in the world. And that is important to all of us because we need to or want to understand exactly who and what we are and where we come from. And that exact same thing is in the business world. We want to understand exactly who it is that we're trading and dealing with. Just yesterday, we had an instance where someone picked up information but was incorrect. Not incorrect in the sense that the information was incorrect. The information was correct, but they were looking at the wrong business with a very similar name to another business. And this set of information said that this business is not good to trade with. And they were shocked because they were talking to the client on the phone and the client said, but we're not in that business state. We are actually good to trade with. Until we establish that this set of data is the wrong data that they're looking at. And when the correct information was found, of course, then there was no issue anymore. So to ensure that you are trading with the correct person or the correct business or the correct company, it is critical that that data that you have is correct. I mean, I've seen some credit applications and I was absolutely gobsmacked in the information that goes through there. It is very important for us as a business to ensure that when we intend to engage with someone, that we get the correct data. I mean, data theft, identity theft is very big in our world today. We have seen things where a company's, let's call it, identity has been stolen, and it's engaging with various credit providers trying to obtain credit, and it's saying, this is who we are. And everybody says, wow, I want to do business with this company. And they check the directors out and they check the identity documents that have been provided for them, and it all tallies up. But behind it is sitting someone that's intentions are incorrect. Then it's additional information that is going to assist you in making the correct decision. I'm giving an example. An accounting firm wants to open an account with a tire supplier for 200,000 Rand. Why on earth would an accounting firm want to buy 200,000 Rands worth of tires? That's the question. So it's very critical that all the data that we receive when we start engaging with someone needs to be evaluated very carefully, very precisely. And now, with all this information not being available anymore, what do we as credit providers do to ensure that we have alternatives in place that is still going to enable us to make those critical decisions on well-evaluated sets of information? So we as a company have seen a lot of these problems come and go. For instance, the fact that banks have said that they don't do bank codes anymore. We are assisting our clients now in analyzing bank statements. Now, a bank statement can tell you an awful lot of things. It can tell you who the client is trading with. It can tell you when they're paying these clients. It can also give you an indication of the turnover of this client. Lots of information can be obtained from a simple document like a bank statement. When it comes to trade references, what is a trade reference? A trade reference is how has Martin Petzer been trading with you historically. Today, in today's world, with analytics, we have the capability of doing far more with information. We don't need to speak to Martin Petzer and ask him how a certain client is paying. Because if Martin Petzer is not in a good mood, or Martin Petzer has had a bad day, or Martin Petzer has had a bad experience with a specific client, the reference that you will be obtaining might not be real. But if you're engaging in analytics, where you analyze actual data, actual information, it's like if I tell you that Usain Bolt can run 100 meters under 10 seconds. If you didn't know who Usain Bolt was, you might have said, geez, like Martin, that's pushing it a little bit. 10 seconds for 100 meters is very fast. However, if I told you that he's done it a few times, and I actually show you the actual video and I show you the actual analytics of how he's done that, then of course you're going to believe me. Then of course you're going to trust the information that I share with you. Now, trade data or aging information and master data information in our world of credit has become critical. Why? Firstly, we need to ensure that we are engaging with the correct company or the correct individual if it's a sole proprietor. Because if we don't, we're already heading in a direction of making a decision on incorrect information. Many a time in the last couple of months, I've come across information where the debtor's name tells me that it's a Pty Limited. And when I look at the captured information and I look at the registration number of that individual company on that master set of data, it tells me it's a CC, which is two different sets of information. So the company has converted from a CC to a Pty, but the time wasn't taken to correct all the data in our sets of information. So now, if we do research and we share the reg number of the data that we're looking for, we're going to come across a business that doesn't exist anymore. And that is going to leave us with some problems. Because this new Pty Limited might have a new set of directors, changed from the members of the CC. It might have a new holding structure. It might be a part of a bigger organization, which could assist us in making our decision of engagement much quicker. So to understand very clearly whom it is that we're engaging with and where they come from is extremely critical and extremely important. So when we start engaging with our client from the beginning, from the offset, and I'm talking about our credit application or our application to do business or our service level agreement, whichever way you use as a formal way of engaging with your client contractually, whatever we put in there, we need to ensure that it is the irrelevant information of this futuristic client of ours, because that is going to guide us where we're dealing and who we're trading with. The next set of information that is critical in our analytical world is the data that we get that is attached to that business. What is it telling us? And why is it telling us that? And where does it come from? And can we trust it? Today's world, data needs to be refreshed on a regular basis. I remember when we used to say, if the bank code is 6 months old, we can trust it. We'll carry on dealing with it. Trade references, 6 months, we'll see it as in date. I'm telling you now, business change so fast these days that 6 months is a very long time. Your aged analysis has become a critical set of information. The analytics around that can do so much for you. We as a company have gone and have employed people that does exactly that. They analyze the critical data that you hold in your business every day, called your aged analysis. They take the information of who the business is, where they are situated, how many directors they have. That's called profile information. And in conjunction, they take that payment information and they say, this business that looks like this has this certain way of activity connected to it. So now we can tell you how someone has historically been managing his payment capability or his payment performance. But not just that. That analytics can also tell you how he will perform now. Because the analytics tells you that. And it also gives you the capability of a bit of a futuristic view as to say, what is the possibility of this future client of mine or this existing client of mine paying me in the future or defaulting on me in the future? Now, all that information, that capability and that analytics wasn't available to us in the past. But it is critical that we understand who the client is that we're dealing with, so that when we start bringing the two closer to one another, the profile and the actual measurement, to make sure that the two is exactly same and is in sync. Because if they're not, you're going to use the analytics of the wrong business with the profile of a different business, giving you the wrong information. It's like getting the statistics of a Porsche and how fast the Porsche can move and drive around a circuit and then trying to do it with a Volkswagen. Because it's two different vehicles with two different capabilities. So the information that we need to understand that we are trading with the correct people and the correct entities is where it all starts from. That very first step that we take, that very first set of data that we start taking in, is this dangerous or is this not? I don't think any of us can remember our first step that we took, but our parents can. I can remember when I looked at my children, when they took their first step, how they stood up and their eyes were big and they were looking for certain sets of information. What information were they looking for? They were looking, where can I grab on or where can I hold on should I start losing my balance? But at the same time, they had to look in their way right in front of them because they wanted to take those first steps and make sure that those first steps are safe. But we as parents were there as well, also taking into consideration all the information in that room to ensure the safety of that child taking the first steps. Now that is what we're talking about here today, is making sure that before we take the steps, that the information that we look at and gather tells us exactly what it is that we're going to engage with. Is there a glass table in front of us that we're going to take a step towards, or our new child that is starting to walk? Is there anything that this child can trip over? Is there anything that this child can slip on? What dangerous information is there that I can observe that I need to remove, take care of, or look at, so that whenever this child takes those steps, that I can make sure of its safety? And that's our transaction. This baby transaction that we are busy engaging with is to ensure that the data that we gather in the surroundings around this before we start taking those steps are 100% correct, and we're dealing with the correct entity or person. I can remember the first time I discovered the difference between the identification number of a man and a woman. I never knew that until someone showed it to me. And this was many years ago. And still today, I can find people that don't know that. And the difference between a PTY and a limited and a CC, the registration number tells you the difference between those entities. But those are little simple things. The difference between a subsidiary and a division. I sometimes sit in awe when I speak with people and I find out that they don't know the difference. That they don't know the one is a legal entity and the other is not. When people expect a holding company to be accountable for subsidiaries accounting system, they don't all take accountability for that. They might be holding shares in it, but that's not where the accountability lies. The accountability lies with this individual PTY Limited or CC. And that is critical information. That is what credit trade data is about. Not just that aging information, not just trade references, not just bank codes, but every set of information that we obtain before we start even engaging with a debtor. Make sure that when a person or a company is engaged with, that you get that information. Make sure that the company that assists you in supplying you with that data is engaging with the correct sources to give you that set of information. Doesn't help that the registrar of companies are there and we don't use it. Now, when you get to certain countries in Africa, you might find that there's more than one registrar. And then it becomes even more difficult. And then the challenge is even bigger to ensure that you are connecting and trading with the correct entity. But as I said to you earlier on, there is so many things that we can do today to ensure that you're trading with the correct company. The other day, a friend of mine asked me, he said, this is a company that I want to deal with, but I'm not sure if they really exist. And I said to him, have you tried Google Maps? He says, what do you mean by Google Maps? Google gives you the opportunity to actually go and have a street view of this business. And then you can see most companies will have an advertising board outside of that address. And guess what? You will be able to see sometimes even if there's activity at that business. I laughed the other day when I looked at my own residence. And guess what? There I was standing in front of the garage, busy putting new varnish on the garage door. So when Google drove past my house and took an outside view of my house, I was actually there. So if someone wanted to ensure that I live where I said I live, they'll see me there. But that's critical information. And the more information we obtain, the more secure we are in the decisions that we make in progressing with what we want to do. So, in today's world, where information is becoming more difficult every single day to obtain, we must use the information we have to the best of our ability to make the correct decisions. Or engage with companies or people that can help us do that. Because they are the specialists in that to ensure that we understand who we are trading with and to what extent can we trade with those people. In the fast-moving world that we're in today, decisions need to be made quick and fast and correct because we want to keep our risks to the minimal as possible, and yet we want to engage with companies and trade and grow our business as fast as possible. Because that is what every business is aiming for today. Growth, success, profit. And that all depends on information. Trade, credit, information. Whether it is actual information, who we are, what we are, where we come from, the profile of the persons. Whether it is public information that is obtained from somewhere in the form of what has happened to this business in the past. Are there negative information around this business? Whether it's analytics on how this business is performing or going to perform or has been performing. I sometimes laugh when I hear a company saying that they want to engage with someone and they name the credit limit that this company is looking at engaging with, and they talk about millions. And when you say to them, to give you adequate information to make a calculated decision around that, is going to cost you 1,000 Rand or 2,000 Rand or whatever, to make a decision on engaging with someone with 5 million. They say, oh, that is very expensive. But yet, they want to make a decision, this little bit of information, to engage to that extent. That is like getting into a car and not even ensuring that it's got brakes that work, that there's petrol in the car, that there's oil in the car, that the steering wheel is connected to the wheels. But you want to start it and drive it. You are going to have an accident as sure as I'm sitting over here. I can remember when they had started the 53-point check in a car, and people don't understand what it really is about. It's critical information that you obtain to ensure that the vehicle that you're going to engage now and going to approach a road where there's other road users on is safe to do so. The vehicle, never mind you, that's going to be behind the steering wheel. Because all that data comes together and gives this person who's going to assess you the security that you know what you are doing. And the exact same goes into risk assessment. It's when we as outsiders observe what information you use to make those critical decisions that scares us sometimes. But don't worry, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to assist you in saying to you, there are so much data available to us in the credit world today. When one set of information falls away, like a bank code, there will be someone else that will supply you with information that replaces that. If trade references become almost invalid and not something that you can trust anymore, someone will become or put a set of information available to you in an analytical form that actually gives you far more than someone's set of information that they shared with you. Because think about it. If we analyze someone's payment behavior for the last 5 years in relevance to what someone tells you what has just happened, because in most instances, the only remembrance is, how did Martin trade in the last 30 days? Did he pay? Did he not pay on time? People don't always remember the good that you've done. They only remember the bad. Analytics looks at it over a period of time and say, consistently, how did Martin Petzer trade? Consistently, how did he perform? And based on that consistency, how would he perform in the future? Now that is because I don't move. Now that is critical information. That is important data. But it all depends on where the source comes from. So, in closing, ensure that when you start engaging with someone, that you gather as much critical information as possible. Ensure that the data that you receive can be measured and can be evaluated. Make sure that once it's evaluated, that you monitor that information effectively to ensure that it continues to stay the same. Because I tell you, when you monitor someone's information, you get to learn a lot about them. You get to learn a lot about what they do. People are creatures of habit. Talking about us. We do things the same way because we are comfortable about the way we do it. And they will continue doing it the same way. Ensure that the engagement that you make is always based on well evaluated critical sets of information. Stay with the times. Use the capabilities of people that have been in this game to assist you constantly. I mean, I'm old school. I come from the old school. But I can tell you categorically that if I had the capabilities that I have today, 30 years ago, I would have employed it with my eyes closed, because it helps me make critical decisions much faster, much quicker, much safer, better evaluated. I know, I still engage with people that say, we need to tick the boxes. We need to see where all this comes from. The one thing that I've seen in the last couple of years is how people have evolved around the data that they look at and use and analyze. Every single business in today's world has got data that they analyze. How much of this product are we going to sell? If we're going to sell so much, how much do we need to produce? How fast do we need to get it to the market? How long can it last in the market? How long can we have before we need to take it off the shelf? These dates and times on every one of these things. Now, if we are that critical about the product that we manufacture and sell, or the service that we render, why are we not that critical about the data that we gather when we engage with those clients? Just as important. Ladies and gentlemen, if it is that you at any point in time need assistance in understanding the importance of data in your world, don't hesitate. Get in contact with us. We've got professional people in the business that have been in the credit world for many, many years that will assist you in understanding the shift that there is, where to get the correct data, why certain data is more important than others, and what to use that will enable you to make the best credit risk decisions possible. Trade data, master data is critical in your world and in my world. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, or Fatima is sitting here next to me. You can share the questions with her on email and we will answer them for you. Or if you want us to have a one-on-one session with you, feel free to share your data with us, your details with us, and we will get in contact with you. I'm sure the majority of you are clients of ours, but if there is questions that you have, remember, I always say, I'd rather sound stupid for 1 second and ask a question than I'll be an idiot for the rest of my life because I didn't ask the question. All right, that's it. Thank you for your time. Have a super day and hope to speak with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.